charismatic leadership is so important for us. And also, I want to thank especially Julia Gillard and Alice Albright, who are the reason we're here today. We are very proud partners of the Global Partnership for Education. We host them. We are grant agents for about 70% of the work that they do. And we're here to tell you that this work is the most important work that any of us can do. And let me tell you why. Firstly, a tech guru told me just the other day, today will be the slowest day of innovation you will ever experience again for the rest of your life. Every day, innovation is speeding up. They also told me that as early as 2022, but definitely before 2025, all 8 billion people on the planet will have access to broadband. In other words, they'll be able to watch the rest of the world on smartphones, even if they don't own one of their own. We know what happens when people get access to broadband. First of all, their satisfaction with life goes up. But what also goes up is their reference income, the income to which they compare their own. And so what we're seeing, what I see every day out in the world, is aspirations are rising. And as a kid born in one of the poorest countries in the world at the time, 1959, Korea was one of the poorest countries in the world, poor, lower GDP per capita than Senegal in 1959. I can tell you that I love it that people's aspirations are going up. But here's what else is going on with the rapidity of technological change. Artificial intelligence, robotics, automation. McKinsey estimates that 50% of all existing jobs today will be gone. Jack Ma, the great leader of Alibaba, says that every single job that requires muscles to do will be gone within the next decade or two. So what are people going to do? What will people do who haven't had an education? What will people do who may have been stunted at birth and are having trouble in school? Well, the deeper question that we're asking now at the World Bank Group, a very difficult question, is will the traditional paths to economic development still be open to all low-income countries? It's agriculture, light manufacturing, and heavy industry. And we're coming to the conclusion that the door seems to be closing. Now, this is not all a negative picture, but we have to be honest about this. And so what we're doing is we're working very hard to try to understand what are the things that we know we have to invest in to help our partner countries be able to compete in the economy of the future, no matter what it looks like. So broadband is really important, roads are important, energy is important, but we now believe that the most important infrastructure that countries can invest in is gray matter infrastructure. Every single child has to have an opportunity. Now, you know, Senegal is such a great example. 7% of GDP on education, 25% of the budget. They have reduced the stunting rates in Senegal to the lowest in Africa, from 34 to 17% in a short period of time. This is a tremendous positive story. And it shouldn't surprise anyone that President Macky Sall is leading this meeting. But country after country I visit, what you hear and what the leaders, especially the ministers of finance who I deal with, what they say is first we'll grow rich and then we'll invest in our people. And the World Bank shouldn't be surprised because that's what we said for most of the last 70 years. But we're different now. You know, 20 years ago in 1994, I was part of a movement called 50 Years is Enough. And that movement was focused on shutting down the World Bank and the IMF. And our argument was that these institutions are too focused just on GDP growth and not focused enough on people. Well, that has changed, especially in the last 5 years. Here's what we're doing now. We are looking at the contribution of improvements in human capital, in health and education outcomes, not expenditures, outcomes. And we're linking it to economic growth. And what we found is that over the past 25 years, if you compare the top 25% of countries who've improved health and education outcomes with the bottom 25% of countries that have not improved health and education outcomes, The difference in economic growth is 1.25% of GDP per year for 25 years. Among the strongest correlations we've ever seen. And every year, that correlation is going to get stronger as automation continues. So we're going to do a human capital index. We're going to rank countries from 1 to however many we have, probably 180. And some of the leaders are not going to like what they see in terms of this will be very controversial, but we have to do it because we have to reveal to leaders this incredibly powerful connection between investing, in this case, in education and economic growth. Now, I want to end with just a small story. This morning, I visited with the ministry officials a school. I do that just about every trip I go to, and I visited with the Secretary of State of the Department for International Development of the UK, Penny Mordaunt. A few months ago, I visited a school in Tanzania, and I had an opportunity to interact with 11-year-olds. And I asked them, what do you want to be when you grow up? And so doctor, engineer, some people said teacher. But two of the young children, one boy and one girl, stood up and said, I want to be president of the World Bank. Just like you, the teachers and my staff laughed. But then I stopped them and I said, you know, I was born in Korea, 1959, one of the poorest countries in the world. We did not qualify for even the lowest interest loan from the World Bank until 1963. In 1963, I was a student in preschool. And if President George David Woods, the president of the World Bank Group at the time, had come to visit Korea to see if we might qualify for a World Bank loan, and if he'd come to my classroom, I doubt that he would have thought that his successor was sitting in that room that day in Korea. I told those students, don't let anyone ever tell you that you cannot be the president of the World Bank Group. Now, I feel a tremendous sense of urgency. I'm very worried about what's going to happen to those children who haven't had an education but who are online, on broadband, watching how the rest of the world works. We have to now work with what Martin Luther King called the fierce urgency of the now. We have a choice. We can stand back and watch as these countries, because of the unrest and unhappiness of young people, fall into fragility, conflict, violence, extremism, and then, of course, eventually migration. Or we can move at an unprecedented scale with the Global Partnership for Education in the lead and ensure that every child everywhere can become whatever she dreams. Thank you very much.